I think one of the main topics will be around ESG and energy transition and what can we collectively do to address that. I think there has been a lot of discussion around the pace of energy transition, the pace of electrification, how does oil fit into the whole supply situation. And it's increasingly becoming clear that at least in the western part of the world, Western Europe, and to some extent North America, this is a major concern from oil companies, investors, the supply chain, and every stakeholder group, in fact. And it's also important to understand that whilst in the Western world, it's driven out of climate change, I think in the developing part of the world, there is concern around the societal impact of that in terms of pollution. So I think over and above, I think one of the main topics that we're looking at is about ESG and energy transition. So there's quite a few. I think as a house at Westwood, we are obviously looking a lot into high impact exploration. And within that space, I think some of the key wells to watch that we have for 2020, we're looking at the Eastern Med again, so Eastern Mediterranean from a gas perspective, but also equally in terms of the South America. So Guyana, Suriname still continues to be a prolific region that attracts high impact wells. And subsequently also in parts of, let's say, Africa, where we're starting to see some of that. The main drivers in terms of companies who are actually driving a lot of the high impact exploration, I think would be the likes of Total, Equinor, Eni, for instance. And subsequent to that, in the North Sea, what we're going to see hopefully is some brownfield, continued focus on brownfield developments in Norway and extracting value out of that. And in the UK, I think, whilst the last year has not been that great in terms of high impact exploration, but we may start to see some moderation in that appetite. I think it'd be challenging to say we can see exits in 2020. I think from what we've seen so far with the Siccar Point process, that gives us confidence that the appetite for some of those exits is probably not quite there, certainly not in the public markets, but also more in terms of secondary transactions. The valuation expectation gaps, I think, are quite large. So from an exit perspective, I think it'll be quite challenging. Having said that, I'd never say never. The likely buyers, it's very difficult, I think, to say who they might be because the well-capitalized PE-backed companies are still looking. But the real challenge again is in terms of understanding the seller's price expectations and being able to match that in a very volatile price environment. So over and above, I think, is going to be very challenging, and it's really hard to pinpoint who the buyers might be.